Good afternoon, everyone. New at 4 this November, North Dakota voters will be deciding whether to legalize cannabis. 15,000 signatures were needed for the question to be on the ballot. The sponsoring committee submitted more than 23,000 qualified signatures. It's a challenge the committee had overcome from failed attempts in previous election cycles. The measure would create a new chapter of the North Dakota Century Code to allow for the production, processing, and sale of cannabis and the possession and use of various forms. The measure would also allow individuals to possess a limited amount, and it would create employer rights relating to the use of cannabis products. We'll have much more on this throughout the evening right here on Valley News Live. The Fargo-Moorhead community laid a longtime leader of local law enforcement to rest today. The funeral for former Clay County Sheriff Bill Bergquist was held at MSUM. A number of family and friends spoke at the memorial about Bergquist's dedication to the community.
Bill loved his job. He loved serving on the fire department. He loved helping people. He loved the Lions. And he loved his family. The motto of many law enforcement agencies is to protect and serve, or some variation of that. Bill's life embodied service to others.
Bergquist served in law enforcement for more than 40 years. He died July 29th at Sanford's Hospice House in Fargo after a battle with Alzheimer's. He was just 64 years old. To the forecast, another beautiful day in the valley, but we may see some storms. Let's get to Summer for a first look at the weather. Summer.
Thank you so much, Stacy, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us on this Monday. Skies are a little dark up in Grand Forks on our home of economy sky cam, as there are some showers and thunder showers in the vicinity. We're partly cloudy here in Fargo and Jamestown, Fergus Falls, Bemidji as well. Up in Devil's Lake, seeing some sunshine with the most notable cloud cover in Grand Forks. Here's a look at that satellite and radar. We've got kind of a broken line of some showers and thunderstorms. We did have more thunderstorm activity out towards Devil's Lake. That has really fallen apart across parts of the Northern Valley at this hour, but back into the James River Valley, down into parts of south central North Dakota, moving into southeastern North Dakota. We've got some additional showers and thunderstorms. Later this evening, we do have the potential for some isolated strong to severe thunderstorms here in the area shaded in dark green. Does include Grand Forks, Thief River Falls, Hallock, Devil's Lake, Carrington, Jamestown. Stacy, I'll time it out in your hour-by-hour forecast and let you know what hazards we might expect coming up in a little bit.
All right, thanks so much, Summer. A foster parent in Monoman County is facing multiple charges after court documents say she abused the children in her care. 49-year-old Sheila Clark is charged with second-degree assault, maltreatment of a minor, child endangerment, and domestic violence. Court documents say Clark would send the foster children to sleep in the same bed with her biological son, and then her biological son would sexually assault them. That son, Wyatt Clark, is already facing charges. Sheila is not yet in custody. You can find more about this story on our website, valleynewslive.com, or your free VNL News app. Former Minneapolis police officers Tu Tao and J. Alexander King have rejected plea deals that would have resulted in 3-year prison sentences, setting the stage for trial in October. They're charged with aiding and abetting second-degree murder and second-degree manslaughter in George Floyd's death, saying, quote, "It would be lying to accept any plea offer," end quote. The deal would have dropped the charge of aiding and abetting murder, and the officer's state and federal sentence would have run concurrently. Now they'll face their fate in trial in October. Tao and King have already been sentenced to 3.5 years and 3 years, respectively, for violating Floyd's civil rights. State Representative Rick Becker, who narrowly lost the Republican endorsement for U.S. Senate, says he plans to run as an independent. If Becker can gather 1,000 signatures by the September deadline, he will compete for the seat held by Senator John Hoeven. In November, Becker would be one of 3 people vying to represent the state, including Senator Hoeven and Democrat Katrina Christensen. Christensen is a political newcomer and an engineering professor at the University of Jamestown. Today marks 1 year since the U.S. withdrew from Afghanistan and the Taliban took over. For many Afghans, it's a day marked by trauma, anger, and fear. CBS News checked in 1 year later.
The Taliban's lightning-fast takeover of Afghanistan just weeks before the United States' planned military withdrawal triggered such intense panic that thousands of Afghans stormed the Kabul airport in a desperate attempt to flee the country. Some even clinging to a moving U.S. military aircraft as it rose into the sky and falling to their deaths. It's an anguish Zakir Razai and his family live with to this day. His 17-year-old son Zabi was found among the dead, while his 19-year-old son Zaki, who had also clung to the aircraft, hasn't been seen or heard from since. The only memories I have are that my children's bodies were mangled and torn to pieces, he says. But for the Taliban, today is a day of joy, as hundreds filled the central Kabul square just yards from where the U.S. Embassy once stood, waving flags and chanting, "God is great," rejoicing that it's back in control of a country it once ruled from 1996 up until the 2001 Allied invasion that followed the 9/11 attacks. Make no mistake, this is a nation that remains internationally isolated, with not a single country recognizing the Taliban government. And yet, the Taliban's day-to-day focus seems to be more about controlling the lives of women. They've told them not to go to work, have said girls over the age of 12 cannot go to most formal schools, and have placed restrictions on women's freedom of movement. Akif Mahajer speaks for the Ministry of Vice and Virtue, which has issued these decrees.
Can you at least see why people look at your government, look at your ministry with suspicion, particularly on this specific issue of women?
No, he says. We don't listen to the world as far as our Islamic law prescribes. We will not yield to the world's unwarranted pressures. Despite the risk, some Afghan women continue to defy the Taliban. In a rare protest this weekend, around 40 women took to the streets of Kabul to demand their rights, chanting bread, work, and freedom. But were instead met with bullets as Taliban security forces fired live rounds into the air to disperse them. The nation also remains in the grips of what the UN considers the world's worst humanitarian crisis after the Biden administration froze billions in assets from the central bank and foreign donors pulled vast amounts of funding that once made up 3/4 of the nation's annual budget. It has to be said that Afghanistan is a far less violent place, but when you consider the fact that Taliban has been stripping the most basic of rights and the economy here remains in free fall, the future for most Afghans remains extremely bleak. Imtiaz Taib, CBS News, Kabul.
Everybody needs to respect our law enforcement, whether they be local, state, or federal. I myself have been notified by the Bureau that my life was put in danger recently by some of these same people.
The FBI and Department of Homeland Security are warning law enforcement agencies to be on the lookout for violent attacks in the wake of the Bureau's search of former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago home. The joint bulletin warns of a plot to place a bomb in front of the FBI headquarters, as well as online posts calling for civil war and armed rebellion. The warning comes after an armed man was killed last week after he tried to breach the FBI office in Cincinnati. FBI agents seized 11 sets of classified documents from the former president's home, but Trump's lawyers certified in June that all classified material had been returned from the estate. Now, lawmakers are asking the DOJ to release the affidavit used to justify the search, or at the very least, let lawmakers see it in a secure location. We're learning more details now of the Delaware man who crashed his car into a barricade at the Capitol and then opened fire early yesterday morning. No one else was hurt, though the incident caused a lot of alarm on Capitol Hill, which has already increased the vigilance of security measures ever since the January 6th attack. Police say 29-year-old Richard York III began firing at law enforcement when his car caught fire. He then turned the gun on himself. Police don't believe York was targeting members of Congress who returned home last week for the August recess. But this did happen at a particularly tense time in Washington. Capitol Police say officers didn't hear the man say anything before he opened fire. They're also looking into whether he set his car on fire because the crash didn't seem to cause the fire. Take a look at this scary sight in Armenia. A dramatic cell phone video captured a massive fireworks explosion at a busy shopping center yesterday. At least 6 people are dead. Some victims are still trapped in the rubble. A toxic cloud billowed through the streets.
Everything shattered in a second. It was like fireworks, fireworks, and more fireworks, and people couldn't escape the stores.
Rescue crews are still scouring the rubble for trapped survivors as the death toll continues to climb. Investigators say they're not sure what caused the explosion. They have ruled out terrorism, but they're looking into breaches of fire safety standards at the fireworks warehouse. Starbucks has asked the National Labor Relations Board to temporarily suspend all union elections at its U.S. stores, alleging improper conduct. Workers at 314 Starbucks locations have petitioned to hold union elections since last year. 220 have already voted to unionize. Starbucks has long opposed unionization, but they're not the only large company facing a unionization effort that has attacked the voting process. Amazon has also levied accusations of improper conduct against the board.